CI Chat. My name is Courtney Kayola, and I will be your host today. And I am here with Michelle Payan, the President of Commercial Investigations.
Everybody.
And this month's coffee chat is a behind-the-scenes look at disputes. I would just like to get started by reading how the FCRA of a dispute. So, excellent for case of disputed accuracy, reinvestigations of disputed information, and mitigation required. In general, subsection F, if completeness or accuracy of any item of information contained in a consumer's file at a consumer reporting agency is disputed by the consumer notifies the agency directly or indirectly through a seller of dispute. The agency shall, free of charge, conduct reasonable reinvestigation to determine whether the disputed information is inaccurate and recurrent status of the disputed information or the item from the file in accordance with paragraph 5 before the 30-day period begin on the date on which the agency receives the notice of the dispute to the consumer or reseller.
Wow, cool. We're supposed to 20 minutes on this. You summed it up for us. Never mind the legalese. Basically, that's the procedure for a dispute. Well, let's mind the legalese. This is a pretty interesting topic.
So that was a bit of a dry definition of what exactly the procedure of a dispute is. So we'll talk a little more about the process of a dispute.
Sure, I'm going to talk from our perspective at Commercial Investigations. And the reason that we chose this as a topic is because disputes are a very, very rare thing compared to the number of background checks we do in our industry. But our clientele, those of you on the line with us, you don't know what goes on or understand it. So when it does come up, you're curious, you're wondering what's going on. So a lot of times, after our client has given the pre-adverse action notice with the report, the notice of rights, and if you're in New York, Article 23A, this calls us because our information is in that information that you just sent them. And basically, they tell us that certain information in their report is not them, inaccurate. They don't use these terms here, but of course, the inference is there. So investigators who handle those calls, so they get routed to the right people. A call, we start to treat it as a dispute. And the process starts, and essentially, like Courtney's definition said, we reinvestigate that information that's being disputed. Now, we also send a form out. It's called a disclosure request form, and our clients have access to that on their client page. And ask the subjects to put that information in writing, but it doesn't require it to be in writing for us to open the dispute. So we still treat it as a dispute and proceed that way. So it usually only takes us a couple of days to reinvestigate. Although we're given 30 days in general, we generally do it in about 2 business days. Back to the subject and tell the subject the information that was found, and also in contact with our client during that.
Okay, so can you give us some examples, Michelle?
Sure. Like I mentioned, the person is very low, but these are some of the most interesting investigations we do. As a background screening company, we do primary source verification, and we're part of concerned CRAs. So we do a high-end investigation the first time around. But there's always human error. There's always the possibility of data entered wrong. If you think about somebody arrested to get a conviction, the number of people that handle that information and the number of computer systems the information is in, there's a lot of human intervention and a lot of places the process can go wrong. So an example that we recently had is we had a person look up payroll records of somebody for an employment verification, and they indicated that the employee was not eligible for rehire. So we went on to our client, and we mark it for our adverse for our clients to see. It's got that information, and the subject disputed that. when we called, the payroll documentation said that, but the payroll person redacted what they said. And I go, oh, maybe I wasn't supposed to tell you that anyways. I'm not going to verify that information. So I had to send a new reinvestigation clean report to the subject, and at the same time we sent it to the client and talked to the client about it as well. Now, the most popular dispute and reinvestigation has with credit report issues. Utilize TransUnion for those. With the report issues, TransUnion has a special process that we go through, but we count all the details. I've had my lead investigators spend an hour on one call. They're going through their credit report line item by line item and disputing a number of accounts and a number of discrepancies from their credit report. That's a very common one, and then we do that with TransUnion. Sometimes the subject already goes to TransUnion and does it, and then we can't get involved. The second most common, criminal record disputes. With records, it's a name and date of birth match. Rarely do we ever have social or address. Now, in dispute, we can sometimes get to a court clerk or somebody, a prosecutor, somebody who has more details of the subject that'll operate with us in giving us further clarifying information. But it's not the type of deep investigation that we do because a very high percentage of ours are accurate. So disputing their criminal record, that's the second most popular. A lot are just upset, we found it, and they just call more or less to vent. But we treat it as a dispute, and we still have to do the reinvestigation. Excuse me, open it up and process it.
And I think it's also important to mention with that sometimes, like you said, they're just calling vent because right, maybe they're upset that we found it, but and they might call back the next day and say, oh, forget that, I don't need to dispute that information. But we follow through and continue to report and continue to check on it, even though they have said now they don't want to dispute it.
Yeah, that's a good point, Courtney. And it does happen once, clear heads prevail and stuff, but we just want to make sure we're dotting all of our I's and crossing our T's, and that we document the reinvestigation, so we do follow that through exactly.
Right. Okay. So I want to just break it down a little more. Can you tell more about the time frame to reinvestigate?
Quick definition was just one small section of the Fair Credit Report Act that deals with disputes. And in the definition that she read to us at the beginning, she mentioned a 30-day. And they have a 30-day window. So if trouble or within that 30 days, we go to the subject and the subject additional information, we tack on a 15-day extension. Now to do that to date, generally, like I said earlier, it really takes us just a couple of business days in order to reinvestigate. And we treat these with the importance when it comes to time, because a lot of times that has gone through a lot of time and effort in getting this person this far in the hiring process. If there's an error somewhere, we want to clear it up so that client can bring that employee on and not have to go through interviews and all the other processes again with their hiring process. So we treat them, it's the most important thing we do if we've got one, is happening with the reinvestigations today.
5-day time frame?
Yeah, it is. The 5-day time frame has to do with furnishers. And some of you on the line are vendors that we use or individuals associated with other ground screening companies that also do wholesale, like we do wholesale. The 5-day, if we get information, say it's a database search, say it's a credit report search, the employment verification I talked about earlier, that we got from somebody else, we have a 5-day obligation to inform them, and they are called furnishers. So in 5 days of getting that call from the subject, we have to inform the furnisher. It was more than 5 minutes. The next thing we do when we hang up the phone, because we're already looking at the report when the person calls and going through everything.
And what are frivolous or irrelevant disputes?
Oh, question, Courtney. The law talks about frivolous and irrelevant disputes. And I'm sure it happened, and I'm sure there's some that we could categorize as frivolous or irrelevant. We don't. As a consumer reporting agency, we can choose and document that it's frivolous or irrelevant and proceed with the reinvestigation. But probably about 95–98% of our reinvestigations and a reinvestigation with the same results of our original investigation. We just tread that line of identifying anything as frivolous or irrelevant. It's just too open for everybody involved. So everything very seriously.
And what about inaccurate or unverifiable information?
That's interesting, and the about this. If we have inaccurate or unverifiable information, we cannot use it. So a lot of times we never get to this point because, as I mentioned before, we do primary source verification as part of concerned CRAs. So we've done a lot of research before you get the original information. But an example is the employment I told you about, where we wouldn't verify the eligibility for rehire because she probably shouldn't have given that to us for the first time. And I think the subject had called and talked to somebody in the interim. Mm-hmm. So that would be an example of unverifiable information, and we're not able to relay that piece, the unable for rehire piece in that situation.
Okay. So you talked a lot about the process that we go through with a dispute. So could you talk a little bit about our clients throughout this process?
Sure, that's a great question, Courtney. The consumer reporting agency and the client is not really well documented or even acknowledged within the Fair Credit Reporting Act where it talks about disputes. But our clients, and that's why we're doing this, and we firmly believe in keeping them informed and letting them know what's happening. So not calling a furnisher of information when we get off the phone with the subject. Our first or second call is calling the client. We might know so is disputing this information. That allows the client to hold on the adverse action, which is supposed to go out 7 to 10 days after the pre-adverse action. It'll allow the client who, maybe for a day or two or a little longer is looking at this adverse report, wondering, what are we going to do to fill this position? It allows them to say, okay, let me take a day or two and see what commercial investigations comes back with. We let the client know up front. The report is completed. In addition to sending the client or the subject the reinvestigation report, send it to the client as well. Unless it's a credit report dispute, that's a little different. Explain to the client if information has changed, why, and if not, why they're getting this report, because it may be a day or two. They might not have remembered the dispute. So we just go through the process with the client and keep them informed.
I think it's important to mention also that the reinvestigation is done with no additional charge to the client.
Oh, yeah, good point. And it's no charge to the subject. Mm-hmm. All of the costs associated with any reinvestigation or dispute is totally bared by commercial investigations.
Okay, great. And can you talk a little bit about a dispute with the credit report?
I just mentioned that if it's a credit report dispute situation, we can't give the client a new report, and that's because of what TransUnion processes and procedures require us to do. The subject gets a corrected report from TransUnion or via us, however that process works. It's an electronic process. But they do not allow us to share a corrected credit report with our client. However, the way for the client to get a clean or credit report that originally made their decision off of, they have to request a new credit report, and they do have to pay for that. So we just talked about no cost, and generally it is no cost, but this is a TransUnion thing, the credit report. It doesn't happen very often, but basically, if you don't hire somebody based upon their credit report, they dispute it, they indicate to you that it's cleaned up. Now, maybe they'll give you a copy, but be careful accepting paper copies. But then, it's not that expensive to run a credit report through us. Credit report just to verify and to document your files with a clean credit report if you're going to go forward and hire this person.
Okay. And so all the news, and we're hearing a lot more about now, is identity theft. So what if the dispute's related to the subject being a victim of identity theft?
Another great point. We still dispute, we still treat that as a reinvestigation. But on our website, I mean, most of you online are clients, and we have this special client page. You might not know that where the page is, there's also a consumer page where the subjects can go to. On our consumer page is document remedying the effects of identity theft. Always make sure that the subject gets a link document if it's via email, or if they request or don't have email, we can mail them a copy of that. So if anybody remotely mentions identity theft, there's document remedying the effects of identity theft.
That was a lot of information to take in regarding disputes. So does anyone on the webinar have any questions or comments at all? Disputes? Read any thoughts anyone has? Well, thank everyone for joining us. We have our coffee chat every month or two, and we will be having another one, and we'd love to hear from any of our clients if you have any ideas on any webinars you'd like to get more information on, anything you'd like to hear more about. And again, I'm Courtney Kayola, joined by Michelle Pine. Thank you for joining us today. Have a great day.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good day. Courtney gets it downloaded, then I upload it, and then somebody, which maybe will be this time period, you go through the list and you say, thank you for joining us. If for some reason you had to leave or you missed it, so every you sign up except those who said no to, you send them this work with the link that will make it watch it. How we guys get those? Yeah. Yeah. We've been needing to change content. And then change a lot of what we do here is
of times like I'll forget and I'll be like, oh shit, I posted that a week ago, we've got to send our email.